In real life, things move at a somewhat continuous path, and by default, this is how Twixtor considers source footage, as one continuous event. That is, it assumes that a given pixel in one frame must have some correlation to a pixel in either the previous or the following frame. In this tutorial, we will learn how to show Twixtor when this is actually not the case. In the case of sudden changes, scene cuts, etc., that flow is suddenly disrupted. Of course, when Twixtor sees it, it keeps on assuming that there is still some kind of movement involving the same objects that it has been seeing, and not a scene change. So Twixtor continues to create motion vectors, but most likely creating a morphing effect that you're not looking for across these edits. Let's take a look at our clip. It has 4 cuts. Let's say it's going to be a commercial for traveling to Turkey. It's currently 8 seconds long, but we want to make it 30 seconds or 900 frames. If we want to slow this entire edit down, we will need to create an interim sequence, like we saw in the Twixtor overview tutorial. I will create a new sequence. Let's drop the interim sequence into this new sequence and call this Marking Segments Edit. I'm also going to add an audio track that I made in GarageBand, and the length is good because it extends past the new length of 30 seconds. Let's add Twixtor to our interim sequence by going to Effects and Video Filters and dragging Twixtor to it from here. Now I will select the interim sequence and hit Return and go to the Filter tab in the viewer. Let's take a look at the effect controls here under the Filter tab. We're going to leave the display on Twixtor to output. Now we can go to the output controls. I will make this whole edit 5 times slower using a value of 20% for Twixtor's speed percentage control. Let's render the sequence and take a look at the result. Note the strange warping that occurs across the scene cuts. This is because Twixtor has no way of knowing that these are separate edits. Normally, when I am working on something like this, say for a commercial, and the director wants to make the section a bit longer and another section a bit shorter, but there are a couple of edits included in these sections, I would take the edit apart and time stretch or shrink each section and put it all back together. But that's rather time-consuming. Or in another scenario, I might have been given the clip with the edits already included. Sometimes it can be easier just to use Twixtor on the footage with the edits. Let's go ahead and see how. In order to mark the edits in the source, we need to make sure Twixtor's display mode is set to Source so we can see the original footage before retiming, and set the edit points in the source timing, that is, before Twixtoring. Then I go to the first frame of the edit, and in this case, that would be frame 0. Here, where it says Mark Segments, let's go ahead and enter 1 in the dialog box and set the keyframe by clicking on the keyframe icon to tell Twixtor that we are marking the first frame of a segment. Next, we go to the last frame of the first cut at 1 second 15 frames and enter 1 in the dialog box to tell Twixtor this is the end of the same segment. We marked 1 at the first frame and 1 at the last frame. Now let's go to the first frame of the second cut here at 1 second 16 frames and go to the Mark Segments dialog box and enter 2. This tells Twixtor that this is a new segment. We will go to the last frame of the cut at 3:08 and also enter 2 in the dialog box. You might wonder why we are placing keyframes at both ends. We need to place keyframes on both sides of the cut to prevent Final Cut Pro from giving Twixtor a value between 1 and 2 in the middle of the cut, which Twixtor will not understand properly. Now let's mark the first frame of the third segment at 3:09. We will enter 1 again because frames marked 1 will not be in between with frames marked 2. By doing this, the cut is preserved. Now let's go to the last frame of the third cut at 4:10 and enter 1 in the dialog box for the Mark Segments option. Let's go ahead and mark the last segment. At the first frame of the cut at 4:11, we enter 2 in the dialog box, and at the last frame of the cut at 5:20, we also enter 2 in the dialog box. I think you may be getting the idea now. Twixtor will not create any weird in-between frames upon retiming when 2 frames in the source are from differently marked regions. Now I set the display back to Twixtor to output and render the sequence. Here is the final result now that we've marked these edit points in Twixtor. As you can see, we now have a much better result thanks to the Mark Segments option in Twixtor.